I'd bought the house 3 years before the accident, a modest two-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every mortgage payment came from my account until the final payment 18 months ago. The satisfaction of owning something outright felt like the first real accomplishment of my adult life. What my family didn't know was that I'd been covering their expenses for years. Mom and Dad's mortgage, $2,300 a month. My sister Katie's car payment, $580. Their utilities, insurance, and occasional repairs. Nearly $4,000 a month pulled automatically from my account through carefully labeled transfers. I never mentioned it. They never asked where their sudden financial stability came from. I worked as a senior project manager for a medical device company, good salary, better benefits, the kind of job that let me help my family without feeling the pinch, the kind of job that came with excellent health insurance, which became critically important on a Tuesday morning in October. The other driver ran a red light at 40 miles per hour. My car crumpled like paper. I don't remember the impact, the ambulance, the emergency room, or the first 3 weeks in the ICU. My first memory after the intersection was waking up 4.5 months later with a breathing tube down my throat and no idea where I was. I learned what happened during those months, piece by piece, from medical records from my lawyer and from the detective who eventually took my statement. My family learned about my finances too. When someone's in a coma, unconscious and unresponsive with a traumatic brain injury, someone has to manage their affairs. Katie petitioned for emergency power of attorney. The court granted it. She gained access to my accounts to pay my bills, manage my property, and handle my life while I couldn't. The legal system assumes family will act in your best interest. Usually that assumption is correct. My family discovered several interesting things while I was unconscious. They discovered my house was paid off. They discovered the automatic payments flowing from my account to theirs every month. They discovered I'd been funding their lives while living modestly in my own. And they made decisions. According to the bank statements my lawyer eventually obtained, the automatic payments to my family continued for the first 2 months of my coma. Then Katie adjusted them, reducing Dad's mortgage payment from what I'd been covering to the actual minimum due, cutting her own car payment support in half, and redirecting $1,500 monthly back to my account. Not out of concern for my finances, but for theirs, because they'd found a better source of income. My house sat empty while I was in the coma. Empty homes are wasted money, Katie told the tenants she eventually found. It just makes sense to rent it out temporarily until my sister recovers. The house was just sitting there, after all, not being used, not generating income. She listed it for $2,800 a month and found tenants within 2 weeks, a young couple with a baby, good credit, stable jobs. They signed a lease with Katie's name on it, paid the first month's rent and a security deposit, and moved into my house 6 weeks after my accident, while I was still on a ventilator in the ICU. Katie collected the rent every month, depositing it into an account she'd opened in her own name. She used it to cover the bills I'd been paying for the family, pocketing the difference. My belongings went into a storage unit, the cheapest one she could find. Some items didn't make it to storage, too much hassle to move, she'd later say. The medical team wasn't optimistic about my recovery. Severe traumatic brain injury, extended coma, minimal brain activity in those first weeks. They prepared my family for the possibility that I might never wake up, and if I did, that I might not be the same person. But brains are strange things, resilient in unexpected ways. At 16 weeks, I started showing responses. Small things at first. Eye movements tracking sounds, fingers twitching when nurses checked reflexes. At 18 weeks, they removed the ventilator. I breathed on my own. At 19 weeks, I opened my eyes. The return of consciousness wasn't like the movies. It was gradual, confusing, exhausting. Days blurred together. I couldn't speak around the feeding tube, couldn't move my left side well, couldn't remember why I was in the hospital. Memory returned in pieces. The occupational therapist worked with me daily. 4217 Oak Street, I said, words slurred but clear enough. The first complete sentence I'd managed in days. The therapist smiled and noted it on her chart. Progress. 2 weeks after waking, discharge planning began. I'd need rehabilitation, home health care, and occupational therapy. The social worker came to discuss arrangements. You'll need a safe environment for recovery, she explained. Someone to help with daily tasks while you rebuild strength. You mentioned you live alone at 4217 Oak Street? Yes, My house. She glanced at her tablet, frowning slightly. On showing current occupants at that address. A family of 3 with a lease agreement on file with the county. The words didn't make sense. I stared at her, trying to process through the fog that still clouded my thoughts. What? The property records show tenants and residents. Is there another address? That's my house. My address. She made a note. I'll have our case manager follow up. There might be some confusion with the records. There wasn't confusion. There was Katie, sitting beside my hospital bed that evening, explaining it like she was doing me a favor. We had to make some practical decisions while you were sick, she said. The house was just sitting empty. You weren't using it. Empty homes are wasted money, you know? So we found tenants, nice family. They're taking good care of the place. You rented my house. Temporarily. Just until you recovered. We didn't know if you'd recover actually. The doctor said probably not. We had to be realistic about finances. It's my house, Katie. I have power of attorney. I'm legally allowed to manage your property. And I did manage it. I found good tenants, collected rent, kept the place maintained. You should be grateful, honestly. The rental income helped cover your bills. My bills. The same bills I've been paying for her for years. I looked at my sister and felt something cold settle into my chest. Where's the rent money? It went toward family expenses. Your expenses, our expenses. Everything's connected when someone's in a coma. Someone has to keep things running. I want to see the financial records. You're still recovering. Don't stress yourself out over paperwork. Everything was handled properly. But I could stress myself out. I could make phone calls once my speech improved. I could request records. I could contact the lawyer whose car I'd kept in my wallet, the one I'd used when buying the house. Thomas Brennan had handled my real estate closing 3 years ago. He came to the hospital 5 days after my conversation with Katie, carrying a folder full of documents I'd asked him to pull. Your sister had no legal authority to rent your property, he said without preamble. Power of attorney allows her to maintain your property, pay your bills, and manage your affairs in your best interest. It doesn't allow her to generate income from your assets for her own benefit. She said it was temporary. Doesn't matter. The house is in your name only. She's not on the title. She's not on the deed. Any rental agreement she signed is fraudulent. She's been collecting money for a property she doesn't own and has no legal right to lease. How much? He consulted his notes. Based on county records and the lease agreement on file, $2,800 monthly for 5 months, $14,000 in rent, plus a $5,600 security deposit. $19,600 total, minus whatever she actually spent on property maintenance, which appears to be nothing. She said it covered my expenses. Your expenses were covered by your own money. Your checking account had sufficient funds. Your insurance covered medical costs. You didn't need rental income from your own house. He paused. There's something else. I pulled your bank records with the authorization you signed. You've been making substantial transfers to family accounts for years, monthly payments to your father, your mother, and your sister. None of that was documented as loans. I was helping them. They were dependent on you financially, then exploited your property while you were incapacitated. That's not just civil fraud. That's criminal. The word hung in the air. Criminal. What do you want to do? Thomas asked. I thought about Katie sitting beside my hospital bed, justifying theft as property management. Thought about my parents, who'd said nothing, who must have known. Thought about waking up homeless in my own life. I want to file a police report. Detective Maria Santos took my statement 2 days later, sitting in my hospital room with a recorder and a notepad. She listened without interruption while I explained everything. The house ownership, the rental, Katie's power of attorney, and the money she collected. Do you have documentation of ownership? She asked. My lawyer has everything. Title deed, mortgage records showing it's paid off, all in my name only. And you didn't give permission for the rental? I was in a coma. I couldn't give permission for anything. She nodded slowly. Power of attorney is tricky. Courts grant broad authority in medical emergencies, but there are limits. Using your assets for personal gain crosses the line, especially when you're collecting money and not properly accounting for it. What happens now? I'll investigate, interview your family, review the financial records, talk to the tenants. If the evidence supports criminal fraud, I'll forward it to the district attorney for charges. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, I moved from the hospital to a rehabilitation facility, relearning to walk without a cane. relearning to write with my left hand, relearning to live in a world where my family had tried to profit from my tragedy. Detective Santos called on a Thursday morning. We're filing charges. Multiple counts of fraud, theft over $10,000, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The DA's office is handling it now. All three of them? Your sister primarily, since she signed the rental agreements and collected the money. Your parents as accessories if we can prove they knew and benefited. The evidence is pretty clear. Katie called me that afternoon screaming, "You called the police? On your own family? You rented my house without permission and kept the money. I had power of attorney. I was legally managing your property. For your benefit, not mine. That's fraud. You're going to send me to jail over a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding. You saw an opportunity when I was unconscious and you took it. You collected $19,000 from my property. You used money meant to help you while I helped you, and then stole from me when you thought I couldn't stop you. We're family, Emily. Family doesn't do this to each other." "You're right," I said. "Family doesn't rent out their sister's house while she's in a coma, but you did." She hung up. Mom called an hour later, then Dad. Both delivered variations of the same message. I was being unreasonable. Katie made a mistake but meant well. Family should forgive family. Pressing charges was extreme. I said the same thing to all of them. "Drop the charges yourself," Dad said. "Tell the DA you don't want to prosecute." I didn't file the charges. The state did. It's out of my hands now. That wasn't entirely true. I could have asked the DA to drop it. I could have written a letter explaining I didn't want my sister prosecuted, but I didn't. The arraignment was scheduled 6 weeks after I left rehabilitation. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom on my first day outside a medical facility. Katie stood before the judge in a blazer I recognized, one she borrowed from my closet years ago and never returned. The judge read the charges: fraud, grand theft, financial exploitation. Katie pled not guilty. Her lawyer argued it was a family misunderstanding that she'd been trying to help, and that power of attorney gave her authority. The prosecutor presented my ownership documents, the rental agreements Katie had signed in her own name, the bank records showing deposits into her personal account, and the timeline of her reducing my family support payments while collecting my rental income. Bail was set at $50,000. Dad looked at me from across the courtroom, his expression somewhere between pleading and angry. I looked away. Katie made bail. The trial was scheduled 4 months out. In the meantime, I got my house back. The tenants were victims too, innocent people who'd signed a lease with someone who had no right to offer one. They left without fighting, without demanding compensation they had every right to request. I walked into my house 3 months after waking from the coma. It smelled different, looked different, felt different. But it was mine, still mine. I kept every document, every record, every piece of paper that proved ownership. Because I'd always been careful, always kept receipts, maintained files, documented everything. That carefulness had seemed excessive when I was healthy. It became evidence when I was vulnerable. The trial lasted a week. The evidence was overwhelming. Katie, on the stand, couldn't explain why she collected money for property she didn't own, why the rental income went to her account instead of mine, or how any of her actions benefited me rather than herself. The jury took 4 hours to convict on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later: 3 years probation, full restitution of $19,600, and 200 hours of community service. No jail time, but a felony conviction that would follow her forever. My parents tried to reconcile afterward. Phone calls I didn't answer, emails I deleted. They needed help, they wrote. Katie couldn't find work with a criminal record. Dad's consulting had dried up. They needed family support. I thought about the $4,000 monthly I'd sent them for years, about it funding Katie's scheme to rent my house, about empty homes being wasted money. Then I blocked their numbers and moved on. Because some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some violations of trust can't be repaired. Sometimes the only thing left to do is keep your documents, protect your assets, and remember that the people who exploit you in your darkest moments will always be capable of doing it again. My house isn't empty anymore. I live in it, recovered and rebuilding. The mortgage is paid off, the title is in my name, and every door has a new lock. And I keep all my documents, just in case I ever need to prove ownership again. Hi, I'm Jennifer. At 32, I'd worked hard to climb the corporate ladder and was proud to call myself an executive at one of Chicago's top marketing firms, earning $195,000 a year. Life was good, until I met Frank Henderson at a real estate conference. "You're the most driven woman I've ever met," he'd say, flashing that dazzling smile that made me forget all my doubts. We got married after a year of dating, and I thought my life couldn't get any better. That's when I met them, Frank's 5 sisters, all divorced and raising kids. At first, they were just scattered voices at family gatherings. "My ex is such a deadbeat," Laura would complain, her 2 kids leaving sticky fingerprints all over my freshly decorated living room. "At least yours pays child support," Barbara would chime in, bouncing a fussy toddler on her hip. They'd smile at me and say, "You're so lucky to have such a successful career, Jennifer." But behind those words, their eyes betrayed something else. Envy, resentment, maybe both. My best friend Kate was the first to notice the cracks. Over lunch one day, she leaned in, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "Why does Frank need access to your personal savings? You already have a joint account." I waved her off. "He's just helping manage our finances better." But things started to shift. Subtly at first. "Babe, you should be home earlier," Frank would say. Laura needed help with her kids' homework today. Then it became a constant refrain. "Family takes care of family, Jennifer. The girls need our support right now." One night, while sorting through bills, I saw a $500 transferred to Barbara's account. "She needed help with rent," Frank said casually. "We can't let her and the kid end up on the street." "That's the 3rd time this month." I snapped. "Are you saying my family isn't worth helping?" His voice turned sharp. "You make good money, Jennifer. We should share our blessings." I wanted to believe him, to see his concern as love. But the calls, visits, and financial demands kept piling up. I started to feel more like a human ATM than a sister-in-law. Things escalated one night over dinner. "I found the perfect houses for all the girls," Frank announced, "within 2 blocks of us. Isn't that great?" I nearly choked on my wine. "All of them? How can they afford that?" "Don't worry about it. I worked out a deal through my real estate connections. Within a month, they all moved in." That's when my nightmare truly began. "Jennifer, can you watch the kids? I have a job interview," Laura would text at 7:00 a.m. "Emergency, can you pick up the kids from school?" Rachel would call during my meetings. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Barbara cooking breakfast. "Frank gave me a key for emergencies," she said with a grin. I confronted Frank that evening. "This is getting out of hand. I can't focus on work with all this chaos." "Maybe that's for the best," he replied coldly. "The kids need a proper aunt figure. You make enough money for all of us anyway." "All of us?" My voice shook. It all unraveled from there. My savings had been drained through multiple family support transfers. Frank had used my credit cards to furnish his sisters' homes. When I confronted him, his charming mask slipped. "You're part of this family now," he growled. "Stop acting like some stuck-up princess." The final blow came during a major presentation at work. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "Emergency, Maria's kids are sick. You need to come home now." Panicked, I left mid-presentation, only to find Maria lounging on my couch. "Oh, they're fine now," she said, smirking. That night, Frank dropped the bomb. "You need to quit your job. The girls need help with the kids." "Absolutely not," I shot back. His face twisted into something unrecognizable. "You ungrateful witch. After everything I've done for you." "Done for me?" I screamed. "You've stolen my savings and ruined my life." "It's called sharing, Jennifer. You wouldn't understand with your career-first attitude. What kind of woman are you?" In tears, I called Kate that night. "Something's not right," she said firmly. "This isn't love, it's control. Start documenting everything and keep any evidence you can." My once pristine home had turned into a chaotic daycare. My career was barely hanging on. I had anxiety attacks in bathroom stalls, my boss asking if everything was okay. "Just family stuff," I lied. But it wasn't just family stuff. It was the systematic destruction of everything I'd built. My independence, my career, my sanity, all sacrificed on the altar of Frank's family-first manipulation. I didn't know it then, but Frank was playing a much bigger game. The houses, the money, the constant chaos. It was all part of a grander scheme, one that would soon blow up in all our faces. Everything unraveled late one sleepless night. On a hunch, I decided to dig deeper into our financial records. What I found made my blood run cold. Wait, what's this loan document with my signature? I never signed for a $50,000 loan. The more I searched, the worse it got. While Frank was out showing houses, I scoured his home office, uncovering bank statements, loan documents, and client contracts. Together, they painted a chilling picture of an elaborate real estate scam. Then came the texts. My phone buzzed with a message from Karen, clearly sent by mistake. Isabel is such a fool. Can't believe she hasn't figured out what we're doing with the house deposits yet. Another ping. This time from Rachel. Frank says once everything falls apart, she'll take the blame since her name's on the documents. My hands trembled as nausea hit me like a wave. I called Kate, choking on my words. Don't react, she instructed. Meet me at the coffee shop across from my office. Now. At the cafe, I showed her everything. Look at these loan documents, that's not my signature. And these client deposits, they're going straight into personal accounts. Kate's face darkened. This is major fraud, Jennifer, and they're setting you up to take the fall. That evening, I overheard the sisters in my kitchen, their voices dripping with mockery. Poor Jennifer. So career-obsessed, she doesn't even notice what's happening in her own house. Remember when she actually believed we needed childcare? Rachel snickered. As if we couldn't afford nannies with all this cash flowing in. I stepped into view and their fake smiles froze on their faces. Oh, Jennifer, we were just. Save it, I said flatly, disgusted. Later that night, I confronted Frank with the evidence. You forged my signature. You're stealing client deposits. This is fraud. His response chilled me to the core. Listen carefully, he hissed. One word to anyone and you'll regret it. Besides, whose name is on all those documents? Not mine. Everything I've done was for family, he spat. You're just collateral damage. I acted scared, submissive, but inside, I was done. The next day, during a family gathering, I overheard Maria on the phone. Yeah, the perfect setup. Frank made sure Jennifer's name is on everything. When it all crashes, she'll take the fall. Poor workaholic wife, secretly stealing from clients to support her husband's struggling sisters. Laura chimed in, laughing. The best part, she actually thinks she's helping family. Wait till she finds out we've been living off client deposits this whole time. I slipped away to call Kate. It's worse than we thought, I whispered. They're running a full-scale fraud operation and I'm their scapegoat. I've been documenting everything, Kate replied, her tone resolute. But we need to move fast. They're getting sloppy, which means they're close to their endgame. That night, I lay in bed next to Frank, my heart racing. The man I married was a stranger. His sisters weren't victims. They were accomplices. And I was their perfect patsy, the successful career woman primed to take the fall. But they didn't know one thing. I had a plan of my own. The morning I executed my escape plan started like any other. Don't forget, Laura's kids need picking up at 3, Frank reminded me, his voice casual. Of course, honey, I said with a smile. Little did he know, I'd never be doing their school runs again. I had spent weeks secretly copying every incriminating document, recording conversations on my phone. The day before, I'd accepted a VP position at a marketing firm in Boston, an upgrade from my current role and 1,000 miles away from this chaos. Meeting Kate at her law firm, we put the final pieces in place. The fraud investigators have everything they need, she confirmed. They'll move once you're safely away. And the restraining order? I asked, my voice wavering. With the evidence of his threats. I had just finished clearing out my office when my phone exploded with notifications. You backstabbing witch, Frank's text read. The real estate board just showed up. A message from Laura followed. How dare you? They're investigating our benefits. I blocked them all and boarded my flight to Boston. Within weeks, everything imploded. Kate kept me updated. Frank's biggest clients are suing for millions, she said during one call. And the sisters' welfare fraud got exposed during the investigation. They're all being evicted. I settled into my new apartment overlooking the Boston Harbor. My new job valued my expertise, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Then the desperate calls started. Baby, please, I can explain everything. I'll change. Jennifer, we're family. We made mistakes, but we need you. I sent all the calls to voicemail. Months later, I read about Frank losing his real estate license. His sisters, no longer able to coast on fraud and welfare, had to find actual jobs. Frank faced tax evasion charges that would keep him occupied for years. Kate called one afternoon. Your divorce is final, she said triumphantly. And guess what? Frank just got served with federal tax evasion charges. And the sisters? I asked. Working minimum wage jobs. Turns out, fraud doesn't look good on our resume. With part of my new salary, I launched a foundation to help women recognize and escape financial abuse. During our first meeting, I shared my story. I thought I was alone, one woman said, tears in her eyes. Thank you for showing us there's a way out. Last week, I received a letter from Maria. We're truly sorry, we were horrible people. Please forgive us. I dropped it in the shredder without responding. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Kate. Just drove past your old house. For sale by bank sign up. Karma's really doing her thing. Standing by my window, watching the sunset over Boston Harbor, I smiled. My new life was everything I had worked for, and more. No toxic family, no manipulation, no drama. Just me, my career, and my freedom. Justice doesn't always need revenge. Sometimes it just needs time and truth. To all the women trapped in toxic families and relationships, I want you to know this. There's always a way out. Be smart, be brave, and most importantly, be ready to choose yourself. Hi everyone, I'm Barbara, a 28-year-old marketing executive, and what I'm about to share completely changed my life. 3 years ago, I thought I had it all. I had just married Bob Reynolds, a charming corporate lawyer from an elite family. The grand wedding at the Reynolds estate should have been my first warning sign about what I was walking into. At our first family dinner after the honeymoon, my mother-in-law Sandra, the queen of backhanded compliments, made her feelings clear. Darling, that dress is interesting, she said with a tight smile. I suppose it's what one would expect from your background. Bob defended me then. Mother, Barbara's dress is perfectly fine. But that was before she got into his head. Living in Boston's high society felt like navigating a minefield. Sunday dinners became endurance tests, where Sandra orchestrated elaborate gatherings designed to highlight my middle-class roots. Did you hear about the charity gala? My sister-in-law Lisa would ask, her tone dripping with condescension. The Petersons were wondering why Barbara wasn't on the planning committee. I was actually running a major campaign at work that week. I'd explain, only for Sandra to chime in. Of course, dear, work is so important. When you're new to our circles. The subtle jabs were relentless. Then there was Uncle Adam and his son Steve, who began appearing more frequently. Steve, unemployed at 30, was a trust fund slacker who slouched in designer clothes. Barbara, didn't you mention your company was hiring? Sandra would ask sweetly, perhaps you could help Steve. Family should stick together. One evening, I caught Steve scrolling through my phone when I'd left it on the counter. Just trying to find that restaurant you mentioned, he claimed, but the smug look on his face said otherwise. Meanwhile, Bob grew distant. Late nights at the office became more frequent, and his demeanor changed, especially after family gatherings. You seem tense lately, I told him one night. Mother says you've been acting strange. She's worried about us. Worried about what? That I might actually succeed in my career. Don't start, Barbara. She means well. The final straw came at a family brunch last month. Sandra accidentally spilled wine all over my presentation materials for a crucial Monday meeting. Oh dear. How clumsy of me, she cooed. But really, who brings work to a family gathering? As I scrambled to salvage my soaked slides, Lisa was busy snapping pictures, likely for their family group chat, the one I was never invited to join. Better be careful with those documents, Barbara, Steve muttered as he passed by. You never know what might end up in the wrong hands. I didn't know it then, but they were already setting their trap. Looking back, every smile, every helpful suggestion, and every gathering was part of a calculated plan to undermine me. Things escalated when Sandra began hosting more intimate family events. Steve was suddenly omnipresent, a bad penny that wouldn't go away. Barbara, be a dear and help Steve with his resume, Sandra said one evening, cornering me in the kitchen. He's looking to break into marketing. I really need to focus on my own work, I protested. Family first, darling. That's how we do things here. Reluctantly, I found myself stuck in the study with Steve, while everyone else conveniently disappeared. You're not like what they said you'd be, Steve remarked, leaning in too close as I skimmed his pathetic excuse for a resume. Who said what about me? Oh, just family talk. Mother thinks you're interesting. After that, I started noticing odd things. My laptop would be slightly out of place, files on my desktop were rearranged, and despite changing my passwords, mysterious emails kept appearing in my sent folder. One night, I confronted Bob. "Why are you home so late?" "Work," he said tersely. "Not all of us have time to help Steve with his career moves." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Mother showed me the photos of you two in the study. We were working on his resume. Your mother insisted." "Right, just like you insisted on sending him those flirty emails." My heart sank. What emails? Opening my sent folder, I found dozens of messages to Steve, intimate, suggestive, and completely fabricated. I hadn't written a single one. Someone had access to my accounts, and it didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. During a dinner party, I overheard Lisa on the phone. "Yes, got more pictures. She's always touching his arm or laughing at his jokes." Bob's starting to notice. My blood ran cold. I wasn't doing any of that. They were twisting everything. One afternoon, I came home early and found Sandra at my laptop. She jumped back, startled. "Oh, I was just looking for that cookie recipe you mentioned." That night, I discovered new drafts in my email, love letters to Steve, written in a style disturbingly close to my home. "You've been spending a lot of time with cousin Steve," Bob said coldly over dinner. "Your mother is forcing these interactions." I protested. "Don't blame my mother for your inappropriate behavior," he snapped. That was the breaking point. I began documenting everything: Sandra's unexpected visits, Lisa's phone always poised for incriminating photos, and Steve's increasingly bold comments. "We should meet privately," Steve suggested one day, his tone dripping with insinuation. "I have some interesting things to show you." "Like what?" I asked. "Emails, photos, things Bob might find enlightening." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just petty toxicity. It was a calculated attack. I installed a hidden camera in my home office. The next time Sandra visited, I caught her on tape installing spyware on my laptop. The final piece of their scheme clicked into place when I overheard Lisa and Steve in the garden. "Mom's plan is working perfectly," Steve said smugly. "Once Bob sees the love letters, that gold digger is done." "What about the photos?" Lisa asked. "Please, I can make any innocent moment look scandalous with the right crop and caption." I felt sick, but I kept my poker face. They thought they were clever, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I quietly gathered evidence, biding my time to strike back. The ambush came on a Sunday afternoon. Bob stormed into the dining room and threw a stack of papers onto the table. "Want to explain these?" he demanded. They were the fake love letters to Steve. "Those aren't mine. Someone's setting me up," I said. "Really? They're from your email, your laptop, your writing style," Bob countered, his voice icy. Right on cue, Sandra, Lisa, and Steve entered the room, their faces painted with mock concern. "We're all here because we care about you both," Sandra said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "Tell them the truth, Barbara," Steve added with a smirk. "About our special connection." "What connection? You mean the one you and your family fabricated?" I shot back. Lisa held up her phone. "These photos tell a different story. Look how close you're sitting in this one." "That's because your mother forced us to work together," I retorted. Steve chimed in. "I have texts from you. Very intimate ones." "Show me the actual phone they came from," I challenged. "Not screenshots." "They were deleted for discretion," Steve said smoothly. Bob wouldn't even look at me. "Our department confirmed these emails came from your devices," he muttered. It was time to play my hand. "Did they check when the spyware was installed?" I asked, pulling out my phone. Sandra's face twitched. I hit play on a video of her installing the spyware on my laptop. "I was just trying to protect our family," she sputtered. "By framing me? Creating fake emails? Making Steve stalk me?" "Don't be dramatic," Lisa snapped, but the panic in her eyes betrayed her. I wasn't done. "And here's another gem," I said, playing my second recording, a smug Steve bragging about their entire setup to one of his friends. "It's all a misunderstanding," Steve stammered. "Like how you misunderstood corporate finance at your father's company," I shot back. His face went pale. During my digging, I'd uncovered some very interesting transactions in their company accounts. "What's she talking about?" Bob finally looked at me. "Nothing," Steve said too quickly. "Go ahead," I said, turning to Bob. Show them what you found in my accounts, every email, every file. Because I have the forensics report showing when and how they were created. Timestamps matching Sandra's visits to be exact. You ungrateful little, Sandra started, but I cut her off. Careful, I warned. Everything you say is being recorded, just like I've recorded everything for the past month. You're bluffing, Lisa said, but her hands trembled. Like you were bluffing about those photos? I smirked. The ones you admitted to doctoring, and those texts, Sandra. Bob stood, his face conflicted. Mother, what did you do? Only what was necessary, Sandra hissed. She was never good enough for you. Good enough? I laughed. While you were all busy framing me, I found where the real scandal was. Should I start with the company finances or Lisa's little corporate espionage side hustle? Their faces crumbled as realization dawned. What they didn't know was that I'd already sent everything to the right people, people who could dismantle their empire with one email. I stood tall. Let's talk about what happens next. I never went directly to Bob with the full evidence. Instead, I sent it to the board of directors at his firm. Their reaction was swift and devastating. Breaking news: Reynolds family empire faces federal investigation. The headline flashed across my TV screen as I sipped my coffee. My phone buzzed. Bob's 20th call of the day. Straight to voicemail, just like his desperate texts. Please, we can fix this. I should have believed you. Give me another chance. The Reynolds family facade cracked spectacularly. Steve's embezzlement from Uncle Adam's company made the headlines first. Millions stolen, with Sandra helping cover it up through fake charitable donations. You've ruined us. Sandra shrieked when she cornered me outside my office. No, you did that yourself, I said, rushing past her. How's the country club membership holding up? Next, Lisa's corporate espionage was exposed. She'd been selling company secrets to competitors. The same skills she used to frame me brought her downfall. The irony was delicious. Miss Miller, my boss, called me into his office. Stellar work on exposing the Reynolds scandal. How would you feel about heading our New York office? The divorce papers arrived the same day as my promotion letter. Bob's signature was shaky, likely because he'd just been forced to resign from his firm. I never meant for it to go this far, Steve confessed when he came begging for help. Really? I said, raising an eyebrow. Like you never meant to steal millions from your father's company. They'll send me to prison, he pleaded. You should have thought of that before trying to destroy my life. The fallout extended beyond the immediate family. Uncle Adam faced a reckoning when the fraud investigation uncovered decades of tax evasion. The IRS was particularly interested in Sandra's charitable foundation. Lisa texted me in a panic. They're freezing my accounts. I need help. Delete. Bob tried again. The firm is filing for bankruptcy. Please talk to me. Delete. Standing in my new Manhattan beachfront condo, I watched the sunset over the city. My Boston house had sold for well above asking price. Meanwhile, the Reynolds family mansion was being seized by authorities. Congratulations on the corner office, my new assistant said, handing me the day's paper. The headline read, Reynolds family business empire collapses amid fraud charges. The final text came as I deleted their entire family from my contacts. We're sorry, it read, signed by all of them. Delete. Success truly is the best revenge. They tried to frame me as a cheater but ended up exposing their own crimes. They thought they could break me, but I broke their empire instead. Now they're facing charges in bankruptcy while I'm thriving. What would you do if your spouse's entire family conspired against you? Would you expose them all at once or take them down one by one like I did? Share your thoughts below. Hi, I'm Janet, a 27-year-old PR manager at Wallace & Partners, one of Chicago's top advertising firms. Life has been a roller coaster, especially since my dad decided to remarry when I was 15. That's when everything changed, and not necessarily for the better. Sweetie, I think you'll really like Margaret. She's different from the other women I've dated, Dad said, trying to reassure me before their wedding. I wanted to believe him, I really did. Margaret seemed nice enough. But her daughter, Catherine? That was an entirely different story. I threw myself into independence as soon as I could. Moving out of the family home at 18 was my first taste of real freedom. I got my own small apartment in downtown Chicago. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Dad helped me move, while Catherine stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. Must be nice having daddy support you all the time, she said, flashing that fake smile of hers. I worked 3 jobs through college to afford this, I snapped back, but she had already walked away. 2 years ago, everything changed when I met Martin Phillips. It was just another client meeting, a presentation on a marketing strategy for his software company. I love how you break down complex tech into something anyone can understand, he said after my presentation. Well, I love how you didn't fall asleep during my PowerPoint, I joked. His laugh was genuine, and something clicked. Would you like to grab coffee sometime to discuss the campaign? He asked, trying to sound professional. I'd love to discuss the campaign, I replied, though we both knew it wasn't just about work. Our first date turned into weekly dinners, then daily phone calls. Before I knew it, we were planning a future together. Martin's proposal at Lakeside Restaurant, my favorite spot in Chicago, was like something out of a dream. Janet Anderson, you've turned my world upside down in the best way possible, he said, getting down on one knee. Will you marry me? I couldn't say yes fast enough. Dad was thrilled. My baby girl's getting married, he exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. Margaret smiled politely, but Catherine rolled her eyes. Congrats, sis, she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Hope this one works out better than your college boyfriend. I've always tried to keep the peace at family gatherings, usually held at Dad and Margaret's house every other Sunday. Janet, honey, you've barely touched your food, Dad would say, always noticing how tense these dinners made me. Just busy with work, Dad, I'd reply, avoiding Catherine's smirking gaze across the table. Martin has been my rock through it all. You don't have to put up with her attitude, he told me one night after an especially strained dinner. She's family, technically, I sighed. Besides, I've worked too hard to let her drama derail my life. But Catherine's drama had a way of creeping into my life anyway. You'll never guess who just got hired at First National. My best friend Patricia texted me one morning. I nearly choked on my coffee when she followed up. Catherine, the same bank that handled all my company accounts. This can't be a coincidence, I told Martin over dinner. She's applied to 3 places I have connections. Maybe she's just trying to what? Ruin everything like she did at Marshall & Co. I interrupted, flashing back to the nightmare of missing emails and lost client contacts when we briefly worked together 2 years ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Rose. Sweetheart, I know times are tough, but I need that $5,000 back soon. What money? I called her immediately. Catherine said, oh dear, maybe I'm confused again, Grandma stammered. The next day at work, my assistant Jackie rushed into my office. The Thompson account transfer failed again. The bank says there's a hold on the transaction. For the 3rd time this month, I muttered, already dialing the bank. First National Bank, Catherine speaking. How can I help you? I hung up immediately and called the branch manager instead. Later that week, during engagement party planning at Dad's house, I caught Catherine scrolling on her phone with a smug grin. While I was showing Mom my venue ideas, Catherine sauntered over, smirking. Oh, by the way, she chimed in, isn't that the same place where your ex had his engagement party? You know, the one who dumped you for his secretary? That never happened, I snapped. I've never even been engaged before. Really? That's not what you told Aunt Carol at Christmas, Catherine said innocently, her fake smile firmly in place. Mom looked confused. Carol wasn't even at Christmas dinner, I pointed out, steering the conversation in another direction. Remember when Martin and I first met? Catherine's smirk faded, but I kept going. She actually tried to ask him out right after our first date. That's not true, Catherine protested. I was just being friendly. Besides, everyone knows how you love playing the victim. Later that evening, I was reviewing my client files when something odd caught my attention. Martin, I called, motioning for him to come over. Look at these transaction dates. Every delayed payment, every system error. It all started after Catherine began working at the bank. Have you documented everything? Martin asked, shifting into lawyer mode. Every single incident, I replied. But it's not just work. Look at these texts from family members. I showed him a series of messages, all referencing conversations I'd never had, promises I'd never made, and money I'd supposedly borrowed. She's been playing a long game, Martin said, scrolling through the evidence, turning your family against you and sabotaging your career. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another text. This time, it was from my cousin Rachel. How could you tell everyone about my husband's rehab stay? That was private. I began typing a reply, then stopped. What was the point? Catherine had spent years weaving this web of lies, and now I was stuck in the middle of it. The engagement party is in 2 weeks, Martin reminded me gently. Maybe we should consider changing venues. No, I said firmly. I'm done letting her control my life. Let her try something this time. I'll be ready. Little did I know how far Catherine would go to ruin my special day. This is officially the best day of my life, I whispered to Martin as we greeted guests in my father's elegant garden. The spring air was crisp, and everything looked magical. Miss Anderson, a stern voice interrupted. I turned to see 2 police officers standing at the garden entrance, holding papers. We have a warrant to search the premises, one of them said. My heart stopped. There must be some mistake. We received a report about stolen jewelry valued at $50,000. Your grandmother's heirloom collection, the officer explained. Catherine stood behind them, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Fake tears. I didn't want to believe it, she sniffed. But when Grandma told me her jewelry was missing. What? I haven't even been in Grandma's room. My voice cracked as I glanced at Martin's investors huddling together, whispering. Let's take this inside, Dad suggested, his face ashen. The theft reportedly occurred during last Sunday's dinner, the officer continued. That's impossible, Maria, our housekeeper of 20 years, interrupted from the doorway. Stay out of this, Maria, Catherine snapped. No, I won't. Maria stood taller, her voice firm. Officers, you need to see something. She led everyone to the recently added security room. After a break-in last year, Dad had installed security cameras throughout the house. Maria led the officers to the recently added security room and pulled up the footage from Tuesday morning. Watch this, she said, pressing play. The screen showed Catherine entering my old bedroom carrying a familiar velvet box. 10 minutes later, she emerged empty-handed. That's not what it looks like, Catherine stammered, her confidence cracking. Keep watching, Maria said firmly. The next clip showed Catherine in the garden, phone in hand. Yes, I'm sure. Plan the idea about the missing jewelry when you visit Grandma Rose today, she whispered. She's been forgetful lately. Dad's face turned red with anger. Catherine, what have you done? She's lying, Catherine shouted, pointing at Maria. She edited that footage. The timestamps are encrypted, one officer said after examining the system. These clips haven't been altered. I can explain, Catherine began, but Dad cut her off. Enough. First, the missing emails at your old job, then Janet's client accounts at the bank, and now this. Mr. Anderson, the second officer interjected, would you like to press charges for filing a false police report? Dad looked at Catherine, years of denial finally crumbling. Yes, I would. Daddy, please, Catherine wailed. She's not even your real daughter. The room fell silent. Then Maria stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. There's more, she said, pulling a stack of papers from her bag. When I was cleaning last week, I found these in Catherine's desk. She handed over a pile of documents, copies of transactions, email exchanges, and a detailed timeline of Catherine's sabotage. Catherine lunged for the papers, but the officers held her back. You had no right to go through my things, she screamed. Later that evening, Martin and I sat in the quiet garden. He squeezed my hand. You okay? He asked softly. Actually, yes, I said, a weight lifting from my chest. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. 3 months after the engagement party, Catherine's schemes unraveled spectacularly. Have you seen this? Patricia announced, dropping a newspaper on my desk. The headline read, Bank employee arrested in major fraud scheme. The audit revealed everything, I told Martin over dinner. She'd been stealing from elderly clients' accounts for months. Grandma Rose wasn't her only victim. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Turn on Channel 5 now. The news anchor's voice filled the room. Former Marshall & Co. employee arrested for selling company secrets. Sources say the investigation began after an incident at a family engagement party. Karma really said, hold my beer, Martin joked. The next morning, Mom called me, her voice shaking with tears. Janet, she sobbed. I found Catherine's diary. She documented everything. Every lie, every scheme. She even wrote about sabotaging your college scholarship interview by calling in a bomb threat. My breath hitched. The scholarship I lost. That forced me to work 3 jobs through college. I'm so sorry, Mom whispered. I should have seen it. We all should have. Weeks later, I stood in court, watching as Catherine faced sentencing. 8 years for financial fraud, plus 3 for corporate espionage, the judge declared. Her banking license was permanently revoked. How does the defendant plead? Guilty, Catherine whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. That evening, I found a letter in my mailbox. Dear Janet, I failed you as a stepmother. I enabled Catherine's behavior, making excuses when I should have seen the truth. Watching you rise above her cruelty while she chose darkness has opened my eyes. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I needed you to know I'm truly sorry. Margaret. 6 months later, I walked down the aisle in my dream wedding dress. No drama, no schemes, just pure joy. Martin's investors had doubled their support, making his startup Chicago's newest tech success. During the reception, Dad pulled me aside. You know what Catherine said at her sentencing? He asked. What? She said, I had everything, but I couldn't stand that Janet had more. She never understood that what you had was earned, not given. I looked around at my real family, Patricia twirling on the dance floor, Maria dabbing happy tears, Grandma Rose beaming with pride, and Martin, my rock through it all. Martin leaned in, ready to start our drama-free life. Actually, I said with a smile, I'm thinking of starting a support group, helping others spot toxic family members before it's too late. He grinned. That's my girl, always turning poison into medicine. How would you have handled discovering your stepsister was sabotaging your career and manipulating your family? Share your thoughts below.